Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get more people admitted. Okay, so those of you who are just hopping on, make sure that you drop in the comments below. Let us know what area you service as a realtor, and we would love to connect with you, make some referral partners. I think that would be fantastic. We've got 95 participants on here all across North Carolina, so I think it's really great that we make some connections there. So in terms of our sponsors, I'll just make sure I get all of my info correct here. So amazing sponsors. We're so grateful for them. We could not do this without them. So give a big thank you to our sponsors. Drop that in the chat for us. We've got Zeno here with Lancaster Law Firm. I'm obviously biased because he's my fiance, but he's the best closing attorney in North Carolina. He's the best. Just gonna say it. I'm biased, but he's the best. And also estate planning as well. So I'll let him do a quick spiel here in a moment. We have Angi Welch. She's incredible. She's Primelending. Angi, if you're on here, please say hello. I don't know that I've seen you, but there's about 90, almost 100 people. So maybe I just don't see your name that you're here. But Angi's amazing. So anything loans, she's gonna be your gal. She's awesome. We have Jim Rauland from Quality Home Consultants for home inspections. I don't think he was able to be on the call today, so shout out to Jim. Definitely check them out. They're really great for your inspections and septic needs. They're really great. I believe they service most of Western North Carolina too, for reference. And then Magnolia Title in the house. Magnolia Title, say hello in the comments as well, just so I can see that you're here. And Magnolia Title, obviously title company, amazing people. We love Magnolia. Okay, and make sure you're muted. If you keep unmuting yourself, I will remove you. So just make sure you're muted. Oh, thank you, Catherine.
You were muted. You were Venus. You were muted for that.
You were muted. Instead of muting the other person who was like making background noise, I muted myself. So that's fun. So yes, Zeno, kick us off. Do your quick spiel, and we'll move from there.
Okay. Hey guys, I'll make this quick so we can get to our panel. My name's Zeno Lancaster. I'm the owner of Lancaster Law Firm. We are a statewide real estate, planning, and business setup and consulting law firm. We do real estate closings, estate planning, and business consulting from Western North Carolina all the way to Wilmington. So across the state, we can do closings. I've got mostly realtors in here. If you're looking for closings in any of the 100 counties in North Carolina, any time period, you don't need to look anywhere else. We can take that on for you. You can have them all under one house in all 100 counties. We have wonderful communication. Everyone gets my cell phone number. If nothing else, you've got the owner of the firm on your cell phone that you can reach out to. In a pinch, we do free addendums for you. If it helps to get buyers and sellers to come together on a contract, you just reach out. We can typically get those to make sure we get that offer sent in or maybe accepted if they're on the fence, literally about the fence or something else. And the biggest thing we do that I think you're going to be hard-pressed to find anywhere else is we have a come-to-you service. Now, there are other attorneys that will send people to a client to sign with them. Ours is a little more than that. We can send our folks to the client anywhere in the country, not just the state, and wherever they want, whenever they want. So before 9 o'clock, after 5, which helps a lot of people who work, and that's probably most of your clients. We can go to the house they're selling, the house they're buying, your realtor, agency, office, wherever they like. So people like the convenience of that. They don't have to drive across town to an attorney's office if they don't want to. And the biggest kicker on that is not only can we do that anywhere in the country, we can always record and disperse same day if you use our service. So I don't know a lot of lawyers offering that. In fact, I don't know any other lawyers offering that, especially not in all 100 counties. It's often at no extra charge to the client, so it's meaning to be extra value for your clients. So if you guys like getting your time back and your clients do, we hope you'll give us a shot. Venus, maybe you can put my cell in the chat. I'm also all over the internet, easy to find. as is my cell phone number, which is fun. So reach out to me and let's talk about how we can help you in the future. Thanks, Venus.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went ahead and dropped that in the chat box, and then I dropped the other sponsors in there as well. Let me just double check. Awesome. Welcome, Adam. Okay, I don't think Angi is on just yet, and I know Jim couldn't be here.
Can everybody hear Venus?
I think they can hear me.
Can everybody hear Venus? I can't. Maybe it's my phone.
Muted, so I think it's just maybe.
Must be my phone.
Okay, cool. So let's see. Okay, I'm good now. Magnolia Title, if you're on, please holler at me. Otherwise, I'm going to move to our panelists, and we are going to get going. So if you are from Magnolia, wave a big flag, say hello, hello, Magnolia is here. I'm going to give a few seconds, then we're going to move to panelists, and we can do Magnolia later if they pop on. Okay, panelists, we're so excited to have our panelists here with us today. We have Logan and Meredith, and of course we have a real estate attorney here, which is going to be extremely helpful, especially for these form changes that we all need to be implementing here very, very soon. So let's go ahead, and I first want to have Logan come up. Logan, say hello, introduce yourself. Logan's a big player here in North Carolina, so we're really excited to have him with us.
Yeah, thanks, Venus. Logan Abrams with Realty One Group Revolution. Got a couple offices around Charlotte, been in the business for about 20 years. Have about 85 agents at the firm now. Yeah, glad to be here. I'm glad so many people signed on. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here, Logan. Excited. Let's see. And then Meredith, can you pop up and just say hello, introduce yourself? Meredith's also a big player here. She's a district director, the broker in charge at Fathom Realty. Come on up, Meredith. Let me know if you need any help too with anything here. I think you're here. I saw you.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, hi.
Hi. Good afternoon, everybody. I want to preface first by saying if you hear any weird noises, I apologize. I have two kittens. They're trying to get into my office right now, so it sounds like there's some really rabid animals outside my office door. But anyway, that's what you hear. It's what it is. Like she said, my name is Meredith. I'm district director, broker in charge for Fathom Realty for Western North Carolina. I've been in real estate for 14 years this year. I've been a business owner for over 20. I'm not a sponsor, so I'll just say real quick, my husband and I also own our own business. We build log homes. You can see my background. So that's where I come from, the construction and real estate background.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Meredith, for being here. Okay, so Zeno, I'm going to let you take the floor. He's going to be our MC. He's going to go through the questions. We're going to talk about form changes, and we're going to deep dive into all of the things that we need to prepare for. So Zeno, go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Venus. I want everybody to clap in the chat towards Venus. She's helping us put all this on. That's why 100 people can get on here for free and learn from our amazing panel. So please shout her out in the chat. She does a great job. I'm also biased in the other direction, so but she really does do a lot of hard work on these things. So thanks everybody for joining. We've had a few of these NAR discussion panels right now. I hope, my hope is that a year or two or three from now, no one has any interest on getting on NAR panels because we all have it all figured out. But for now, it is by far our most popular panel. Everyone's trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure it out, and I went to school for this kind of stuff. So if you feel like you don't have it exactly figured out yet, or you're shaky on it, just know that you're in a huge boat with a lot of people. And that's why these panels are so helpful. We can talk it through, hear from some very smart people in the industry on what they're doing in their agencies to prepare for it. As we get to make, and the changes are coming up, my understanding, we're supposed to start doing things differently in August. So is my understanding. So some people are already doing them, just going ahead and doing them to get used to it. Right. And I don't think that's bad at all. I think that's great. And so that's what we're hoping to talk about. And basically we're going to have some questions, some discussion with the panel. And then if we have some time, we'll open it up to some questions from the attendees for the panel. And Meredith and Logan, basically what I like to do is if if you guys have answers and you're discussing things and I'm discussing things, we're going to let that roll. And then once we sort of slow down on the topic, I'll move on to the next question. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we've done it in our past NAR discussions. But I will say, you know, a lot of agents, in my opinion, and this happens in life when anything changes. I remember when we went from settlement ALTA statements and settlement HUD statements to a closing disclosure, everyone freaked out. And, you know, the attorney isn't creating it on a loan closing, the lender now is. And what's this going to mean? I know lawyers that retired over this, guys. And it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was just change. And guess what happened? The industry moved on and things closed and it was fine. Now there were for a year, there were some hiccups there, and there'll be hiccups with this, but do the best you can, surround yourself with smart people like you're doing. And the fact that you've attended this, you're part of the solution on that regard. So if you're doing that, you're doing more than most are, and you should be in good shape for this kind of thing. So we've got some things that we're supposed to be doing August 1st. I'm gonna sort of start with one of our two other panelists, and then I'll kind of switch back and forth on our questions. So Logan, I'll start with you. How are you? What are some of the things you're doing with your team and your group to make sure they're prepared for the August 1st sort of start date on these things?
Yeah, so that's a good place to start. So first thing I'm telling everybody is that the changes that we're making now are probably not the only changes that are going to happen. Okay. This is going to be, in my opinion, probably at least a 2-year cycle of changes. I'm actually kind of shocked how fast North Carolina got these documents out and together. I don't think the settlements that are in place are going to be exactly what's written in concrete and stone going forward. I think I think the August 1st start time is a little bit premature. I would have thought a January timeframe would have made a little bit more sense, because I still think both the state governments and the federal governments and the Department of Justice and NAR and all the people involved have dozens of unanswered questions to make. So we'll go into today what we're going to be doing in North Carolina. We just had a training class for all of our Realty One agents in Charlotte last week on the new forms, but that's what we would do normally any year when they update forms. So that wasn't anything. I mean, yes, there's new forms because of the changes that are taking place, but usually every May or June, we try to do a new forms update class. Regardless, we operate in North Carolina and in South Carolina. So between the two states, there's always 4, 5, 6, forms changes that have taken place. But I mean, I'd also start off by saying I think in North Carolina, we're coming from a good place in these changes that are happening. When I talk to other broker owners at Realty One Group that are in Florida, Arizona, California, where they haven't had a required buyer's agency agreement, they're freaking out 10x to what we are. But I've been in this business for 20 years. There's always been a buyer's agency agreement since I started. The commission percentage was always listed on the buyer's agency agreement as it was on the listing agreement. So a lot of these changes that we're getting into, I don't think have as much shock to them, to us that have been operating in North Carolina, as it has to, I believe it's 32 other states that haven't had a required buyer's agency. But luckily in North and South Carolina, they've had a buyer's agency agreements for almost 20 years. So, we went through all the forms with everybody. We're explaining to them, and it's a lot of what I started to explain to people is like, remember how they taught you to do things in real estate school? All right, well, that's now how we're going to have to do that. We haven't been exactly doing it that way before. Like, nobody's been getting buyer agency agreements signed at the first point of contact. That's just not how the business has been operated, even though that's how they taught us in school for all these years. But now those things are kind of coming to a little bit more fruition. So, that's how we've been getting people, ready for it and reviewing the forms and going over them to make sure people are comfortable discussing them with buyers and sellers. and having those discussions, because like I said, I don't think as much is changing in North Carolina as it is in other states. It's just more so the day-to-day operations of how we run our business with our clients, with our buyers, and with our sellers. Those discussions are changing, and the point in the transaction at which you need to have those discussions with your clients, that time frame and that window has been altered a lot by this settlement. But that's sort of how we're going about it. But I think there's going to be a multitude of changes down the road. I'd be surprised if in a year from now we were using these same forms in North Carolina that they just put out, whatever, a month or so ago.
Yeah. Meredith?
Yeah, so, we're a little bit different. We're countrywide, but we're virtual. So we don't have a lot of face-to-face meetings. So I make sure that as the information is trickling down from NAR or NC Realtors or the Real Estate Commission, that I'm dispersing that among the agents. The big conversation that I've been having with the agents is I want to make sure that they remember that their value has not changed. Just because the rules have changed does not make them any less valuable in the industry, and I don't want to see them undercut themselves because of the perception that buyers and sellers have now on what we should be valued at, our pay or whatever that is. So I think as we're rolling into this right now, and again, as Logan said, North Carolina has always been ahead of the curve. We've always had documentation that a lot of states didn't. I came from Maine, and I can tell you that our 4-page offer to purchase versus our 18-page down here is a lot different. So I think that North Carolina has always been stricter, which maybe we're not going to feel the pinch quite as bad as this comes down the pike. And again, anything we say today, I do want to have you guys remember, you need to talk to your firms and your broker in charges, because a lot of what we're going to say today is what we're seeing from our experience and what's going to happen here. I honestly don't feel like, outside of paperwork and the way that agents need to describe things to their buyers and sellers, that we're going to see a huge change in the industry. Agents still need to work or base their conversations around the skills that they have in real estate. Again, bringing value to the table. And it comes down to making sure that we're helping the agents understand what the paperwork is, so they are explaining it properly, so we don't put ourselves back into this position that we were in to begin with. Had things been explained to buyers and sellers the way they should have been, we may not be where we are now. I think that there's so many firms in this country that we obviously all do business differently. And I think that we kind of strayed from a norm, and that's, again, what might have gotten us into this issue. So I'm encouraging agents, please, if something doesn't make sense or you're uncomfortable having a conversation with your buyer or seller, you don't know how to fill out a document, you need to contact your broker in charge or your state broker if you're with a firm that has a state broker. Because if not, these issues are not going to get resolved. We're going to keep running into problems if questions are not being asked. And it's okay if you don't understand it the first time you ask it again. I'm not going to get mad at you, as I'm sure a lot of broker in charges are not going to get mad at you if you're trying to come from a place of understanding. If you're just not listening, we might get a little upset. But I know that's not how most of you function. You're just trying to understand so you can do it right and make sure we don't run into this again, and that you have happy buyers and sellers. Again, understanding the form changes is probably going to be one of the biggest curves that we've got to work on right now. So I encourage you to just read them. I know it's not riveting information, but please read them, highlight things you don't understand, and let's have a conversation about it.
But also, this isn't all bad. I mean,
no.
The fact that now a buyer or an agent representing a buyer who wants to make an offer on a property is probably going to actually have to have a conversation with the listing agent, man, that sounds pretty darn good. I mean, that for all parties included. So I think there's a lot of just, I don't know if fear mongering is the right word, but everybody just seems to be so negative about all these changes that are taking place. But there's going to be some positives that come out of this. Like Zeno, you mentioned the last time we went from the HUD to the CD. Well, that also came with the requirement of you getting it 3 days before closing. I remember sitting in attorneys' offices prior to that and being like, I'm not bringing my clients into the room to sign until you provide us with the HUD on like the coffee table, right? So, but that was a positive that came out of that, is that now we get to see the closing disclosure. So this is also going to have some positives to it. And I think the communication between agents which is part of our value proposition as a buyer's agent, is communicating with the other agent and letting them know where your client comes from, or the reason why they're negotiating, or whatever, just creating that bond with the other agent and introducing yourself. Like, there's going to be positives that come out of this. So I'm not someone that's just on the side of, this is terrible, this is bad, this is what we got to do, rah, 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 here we go. So I think there's also going to be some positives that come along with it.
Absolutely, guys. And that's absolutely right. It's, again, change is painful, but there's usually good reason for it. Not always, but usually. And I think you're right. I think it's going to ultimately help. There's a lot of things that people weren't doing that they should have been, like you mentioned, this will just kind of push them maybe to try that out. I also am a lawyer, so transparency and specificness is just, that just pleases me so much. I like that. I'm a nerd with that kind of thing. If we add more of that to real estate transactions, it's a breath of fresh air for me. I've now, this is rare, but I've had closings where I had the two agents bickering a day before closing on what I was supposed to be cutting as commission checks at closing. And that's thankfully rare, especially here, but I imagine it may not be elsewhere. And this sort of thing is going to really help everyone be on the same page and in writing, which is nice. So that I don't have to warn them that I have to take the commissions completely off, and they can do it outside of closing if they can't agree, which is, by the way, what happened. And they agreed all of a sudden. So I appreciate not having to go there with my agents that are sending me work, if that makes sense. So I know people are talking in a big way about this Form 220, where, and it's not how to fill it out and how to sign it. It's more the logistics of using it. When you're going to put in an offer, what do I do? Do I send that first? It's not going to be on the MLS. So do I text the listing agent and see what they're doing and if they'll send me one of those, or do I send them one? I'm curious what y'all's thoughts are on that, because I personally don't know on that, and I'm hearing a few different things on it. So I think we're still figuring it out, like Logan mentioned. Meredith, I'll start with you on this one. What are you feeling is the proper way to handle that?
Okay, so I actually just had a conversation with the legal hotline and NC Realtors yesterday about this form, because they accidentally sent out two different versions, which caused a lot of confusion. So the first version they sent out said that either the listing agent or the seller signs it, but not both. And the next one said that all parties should sign, so everybody's on the same page. The latter is the correct one. Everybody should sign, so they're on the same page. So when you're sitting down to do a listing agreement, you should be filling out this form with your seller. If a buyer agent sends you one, that's going to happen. According to NC Realtors, there's nothing to say that one side or the other is going to do it first, and that's the one you have to go with. It's a negotiation, so you may end up with a couple of them. You cannot send it with Form 2T. It cannot be part of the offer to purchase. However, if it is a buyer drafted offer to purchase, meaning a buyer has an attorney draft it for them that is not a standard state North Carolina form, the compensation agreement can go with it. And it can be in an email that the buyer is requesting that you are making the sale contingent, or the offer contingent, on the buyer agent commission. But again, you cannot do that on North Carolina pre-printed forms. You cannot have anything that has to do with commission or compensation on the 2T, or have that Form 220 go with it. Again, that's a little confusing in that bulletin that came out from NC Realtors, because one paragraph says an offer can have it, and down bottom states the North Carolina Commission rule that you can't. So again, look at that verbiage and realize they're talking about an offer, not Form 2T. Again, an attorney drafted offer. So that's creating a lot of confusion. So that bulletin I sent out to all my agents. I talked over it, the do's and the don'ts. Again, as Logan was saying earlier, the rules are going to change. Today we know what that bulletin is and how we're supposed to do that form. Tomorrow we may not. They'll change it again. So if you sit down and go over it with your seller, that's the best practice. There is a potential that you'll have to do two forms. If the seller is agreeing to pay a portion of the buyer agent commission, you have to check the seller box and they have to do one. If the listing firm is going to pay part of it, you have to do whatever the percentage of the buyer agent commission is going to be paid by the listing firm, and it has to be on two separate forms. So that's where we're at right now with that. Again, it could change. So explaining that to the agents is paramount right now. There's going to be forms, I'm sure they're going to be filled out wrong. That is where we come in to review them and help you guys through that.
Yeah. Logan?
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of it's going to be sort of how we exchange discussion or dialogue with other agents when you send showing feedback, but before you make the offer, right? So why wouldn't the agent just say, hey, on their showing feedback, hey, house shows great. Can you send me form 220? Like just ask for it up then. Like you haven't started quote unquote making the offer. Like, yeah, they're not wanting us to send them together, which is just a ridiculous ask in my opinion. But like if you got it 30 minutes before you sent the offer, like you know, so I think a lot of that stuff is going to possibly just come up with the showing, you know, the way people use showing time, and I assume everybody's MLS on here. I mean, part of this too is going to come down to like what's the state saying versus like local MLS boards. I mean, that's another whole level of BS that should eventually just evaporate. My opinion, should just be one MLS per state, but we won't go there right now. But yeah, I mean, like, so, you know, when you schedule a showing, an agent could put a document in there that every agent that shows it gets a copy of that document, right? Sometimes it's the floor plan, sometimes it's the HOA information, sometimes it's whatever they want to tell you, the features of the house, or, you know, whatever. So could this form 220 just be one of the documents in there that you got during showing? Then when you're ready to make the offer, you can just go back to the showing that you already requested, download the document, then have it pulled up and ready to go. If the agent didn't provide it, ask for it during, after, or shortly after. So again, there might be a positive out of this, that everybody might start leaving feedback because they want to be in communication with the other agent to get that document without having to request it the same time they're making an offer. But you know, it's fairly obvious when you think your clients want to make an offer. Luckily, this isn't COVID anymore. We're not trying to make sight unseen offers like from our couches. So I think it's going to be a little bit easier. But yes, if you think your client has interest in the house, I'm suggesting agents just ask for that up front like they would do when they provide showing to that. That way you have the document. It doesn't become some sort of unknown when they go to write the offer. And then that way, if you see the compensations being offered does not match what you have on your buyer's agency agreement, you can then have a discussion with your buyers about how that difference is going to be made up, or what you all decide to do prior to making the offer. But I think that's the step that now needs to occur. Is, you know, too much of us for too long have just been filling out buyer's agency agreements and all that stuff at the time that we made the offer with our buyer. You know, don't anybody please turn me in. I'm sure I'm not the only one on here that's done that. But now we need to just have one step prior to that where you can see this form, see the compensation being offered, have a discussion with your buyer. Maybe you factor that into the offer price and the offer discussion with the sellers. Although it's not on the 2T, it's still part of the discussion with the buyers, and then again with the selling agent when you go to make the offer. So that's sort of what I've been instructing our agents to do here over the last few weeks going into August.
Yeah. I know. So again, I've had a lot of these panels, and I think all that sounds absolutely correct, guys. Here's what I hear from all my buyer agents. Well, what if I'm trying to submit an offer on this house? And this is just practically speaking, guys. I know it's not supposed to be, your buyer agents are supposed to talk to their clients about, look, this is my worth. This is what we agree I should get paid. Hopefully we can get that from the seller. If not, you're going to cover me. A lot of agents operate that way anyway, buyer's agents. And let's say they reach out to the listing agent for this feedback or give this feedback or whatever, that I know they're going to be worried. Well, what if I don't hear back for a day or two? And in the meantime, the listing agent's getting offers, or what if, and so I'm curious, are you guys at some point, and I don't know the right answer to this, by the way, are you telling your buyer agent, if you're not hearing back, to just go ahead and float one over to the seller and see if they'll respond to that? Are you telling them to explain that to the buyer and just say, look, I've got no offer of compensation. We might as well put in the offer, and you may have to pay me the compensation we've agreed to. What are you telling your buyer's agents to do? Look, I know we've got listing agents, buyer's agents, and hybrids on this call. Between you guys, I see it all the time. I can't get the listing agent to answer my text. And this would be on the, on something smaller than what's being offered in compensation. Or listing agents will jump on and be like, I don't know what you want me to do. We had 20 offers on this property and I'm doing the best I can at communication. So what are you guys telling buyer's agents? Because I know a lot of them are going to be like, well, I'm sort of handcuffed on putting in an offer when I don't know, when my client doesn't know whether they're going to have to pay this compensation or whether the seller's going to. I'll start with Logan on this one.
I guess I'm coming from the standpoint that I believe the listing agents are going to be pretty forthcoming with the compensation that's being offered. Maybe that's incorrect stance, but yeah, I mean, look, we've always been forthcoming with it because it's always just been on MLS. Now, if anybody asks me, and I've sent letters to NAR that I don't get much in response other than a thank you email, but in my opinion, the buyer's agency compensation should have just been a public field. Okay. We could have solved half these problems, make it a public field instead of a private field. Everybody knows, everyone's on the same page, whatever website you go to, it's all the same thing. We all know what's going on. I think they've actually created another layer of secrecy, which to me, I thought these lawsuits were trying to unwind. But apparently, again, I don't have a law degree, so they didn't ask me. But so we were always forthcoming with the buyer's agency commission before. It was obvious. Everyone knew where to go and look for it. There it was, plain as English. You could see if it was ever changed in the history of MLS. So I guess my stance is just that I think listing agents are going to be pretty forthcoming with what compensation's being offered. Now, whichever manner they choose to communicate that is going to be up to each listing agent. I don't think firms should be in the business of telling listing agents how they need to communicate that. I think that's a bad stance. I'm certainly not doing that for us at Realty One Group. But yes, I think listing agents are going to now be answering more calls, more texts, more emails, more feedback requests. That is going to specifically have that as one of the main questions on there. That's the setup that they've created for us. I don't agree with it, but that's the game that we're playing. So I guess I don't see there being now the buyer's agent might not agree with what they're saying, the listing agent saying. That's a different discussion, but I guess I'm under the impression that all listing agents, of which I am, at least 50% of my business is listings, are going to be pretty forthcoming with what the compensation that's being offered by the sellers are. So, I guess we could have this discussion a year from now if like listing agents are holding it tight and they don't want to do it because they want to make all the commission. I don't know that for right now, but it seems like every other agent in, not just at my firm, but across Charlotte and doing transactions with, seems like everybody's going to be pretty forthcoming with what the agent compensation is being offered, so that it's not going to be that hard to extract that. Now, they're saying that we can't make it part of the negotiations, but any, Zeno, I'm sure you'd agree, but any legal scholar would say that it has been part of it before. It's just the buyers didn't have enough wherewithal to know what they were actually paying for. So now that's just going to come to the light. So these things aren't new. I guess I just think that listing agents are going to be willing to share this. I don't think that you're going to have to pull teeth to get this out of them. At least I hope not, I guess.
Meredith?
I think it comes down to having open and honest conversations with your listing agents and remind them that they are often on the buy side too. So how are they going to feel if their calls are not being returned? So making them aware that in this changing part of the industry right now, that they're going to have to be more communicative. We all get busy. We understand that. But just outright not answering phone calls or texts or emails, how is their seller going to feel that they're being represented if that that important piece right now is not being handled properly. So reminding agents that communication is key. It always has been. And now there's another whole level of importance to that communication, because you're holding up a deal if you are not. And then we're right back into the same issue again, where we're going to be accused of making deals contingent on compensation, which is not what our intention is. But if you're not responding to calls, that's exactly what you're doing. So constant open conversations and reminding agents about who are they working for. They're working for their client. If they're not answering calls, they're not working for their client.
Right. Or how are they getting the Form 220 over to the other party? I mean, that's yet to be seen. I think how available that form is. Because when you get it over, you obviously want to have a chance to, maybe have a discussion with the other agent about that actual form prior to making your offer. So again, how that's being shared, because what I don't want to see, and Zeno, I'm sure every attorney would agree, is, listing agents and buyer's agent having text communications. Then the Form 220 comes over after you've already gone under contract, and that's different than what was relayed in the text communications. Then you've got a whole nother can of worms between two firms that are technically due whatever commissions were said to them. So I think listing agents need to be communicative of how they're getting this form over to people. I don't think I've seen anything from Showing Times yet saying that you can't add it as an attachment to the additional.
You can't, because Showing Time is part of MLS, so they did put the kibosh on that on us.
Oh, okay. All right.
If I can find part of that, I can send it out. But yeah, that was one thing they took away from us. It can only go on company websites. That's it. As long as that website does not IDX or syndicate to anywhere else.
Oh, no, I was saying in between the two agents, like after a showing has taken place.
Oh,
how they can make
not
that
advertising
available.
it as part of the Showing Time schedule.
No, not advertising. I'm talking about after the showing's taken place. Then you can provide additional documents to the agents who have shown it. So far, I think that seems like an easy enough way. You can obviously just reply to the email of the feedback, like I was just talking about before. But yeah, we the extra step involved is seeing the 220, agreeing to that between both parties prior to making the offer. But it seems like the listing agent should want to be as involved in that as a buyer agent would be. I don't see why they wouldn't, because if they realize that's a step prior to them receiving the offer, then hopefully I think they'll be on the same page. But I guess I'm just coming in from the standpoint that I think listing agents are going to be willing to, communicate this with us.
Yeah, I think it's something that, of course, and this is a good thing too, discussing with buyers the compensation and how it works a little bit better, or for some people at all, is going to be a great thing. I think that a lot of buyers agents are going to think and feel they need this Form 220 signed early, before the offer, and some of them maybe even before showing the property. I mean, if they have had these conversations with a buyer and the buyer says, I'm not paying your compensation. I only want to see homes where your compensation is covered. I mean, number one, I think that it's a good thing for buyer agents to explain, listen, we're going to get that value whether it comes, it's going to be a wash on your offer, whether you're paying it or whether the seller is potentially. So we can talk about that. I would, if it were me, I would tell them, let's look at all the houses. We can factor that in when we make an offer. But I know that a lot of them may still want to see these done up front. I've seen, and again, like you guys are both saying, this is all going to change as we start practicing it and seeing it. So I've seen some people say, do it after the showing. You can even get this done after the contract. It can't be made part of the offer. And then I've seen some people say, well, we just want to get it up front. It's not part of the offer, but we want to get it up front and see what's being included, and then we'll make an offer, which is kind of part of the offer if you really think about it, because then And I'm curious, what do you guys think about one way or the other, or that anything about that?
Well, I guess I'd say, look, if you're for a realtor who's ever shown or dealt with a FSBO, this is pretty similar to that. I mean, or that's how you're going to have to operate, I guess I should say. You're going to have to operate as if prior, the last 20 years, it was a for sale by owner. You called them up. Can I make a showing? Okay, what are you offering for compensation? It was, that wasn't out of the realm for dealing with FSBOs. Unfortunately, now that they've just swiped it off the MLS and made this, some hidden genie we need to get out of the bottle, we're just going to have to treat it like sort of like you're dealing with a FSBO. Now, whether you do that before you show the property or after you realize your client has interest, or before scheduling the appointment, I mean, that's up to each individual agent and how they want to run their business. But I think that's the mindset that you need to go into it with. But yes, I think the conversation between buyers and buyers agents regarding compensation and regarding how it's going to be paid and all that stuff, that's necessary. And I'm personally for the idea of buyers actually eventually, quote unquote, actually paying for some of their representation. I don't know any other professional service for hundreds of thousands of dollars that quote unquote was for free, even though it's not. But so yes, the idea, and we can have a different discussion about commission, compression. It's been happening for well over 10 years in this industry. These lawsuits over the last 2 years didn't create this. But yes, the idea that buyers should want to pay for good representation is something that should not be a new concept in this industry in any state or really anywhere for that matter. So yes, having that discussion with them about what it is and what it's going to cost and all this stuff. I mean, the one unknown I think that a lot of the agents, at least at my firm, seem to have is how to handle this with new construction, because they have one listing agent, for whatever, they're building 5 million houses all over the state or whatever. They got like one listing agent. It's probably not even a real person. There's no way to get in contact with them. So, in new construction, it'll be a little bit more unique. Although, oddly enough, new construction has been having buyer's agents sign these commission agreements for as long as I've been in this business. So the form side of it, they've been ahead of. But how you find out which each builder, because they're dramatically different in the compensation that they're offering, how you get in touch with somebody then, how prior to your showing or prior to your buyers going to see a new neighborhood, that's an unknown that I don't have a great answer for. That some of Charlotte is a big new construction market. It's almost 20% or so of our market. How that's going to pan out. I met with two people from two different builders in the last week or two. They're trying to figure out different ways. One of them actually said at their neighborhoods, they're planning on having on the wall, like in their sales office or whatever, what their commission structure is for that specific neighborhood. So that as soon as you come in, you could take a look at it, you could take a picture of it, whatever you need to do. So that's kind of an unknown, but between, buyer and seller agents, I think it's going to come out.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So a big part of this, no matter what happens with that, is going to be a big part that everyone is talking about is buyer's agents. And I think this is a good thing. Not only, I know some buyer's agents are, I'll always show my value. Well, that's great. You probably always do. Not every buyer agent has. And I know that we get questions from some of the buyer agents, especially new ones. Well, what does that mean? What are some good strategies I can do to show my value? Am I currently being valuable? Are there practices I could be doing? And really, this goes for listing agents as well. What are some strategies you guys are sharing with your agents? Is this coming up where they're saying, do we have any ideas? Do we have any brainstorming on how I can add value to what I'm doing, how I can make sure it's communicated well to my clients, and, especially to justify my compensation and make sure no matter who's paying it, the client feels like that's the compensation I deserve. Meredith, you want to start us?
Yeah. I think helping buyer's agents hone their skills and helping them understand how to define to a buyer what a buyer agent is, because I can guarantee the masses don't even understand what a buyer agent is. They hear the phrase real estate agent. They know real estate agents buy and sell houses. But what does that mean? That means negotiations. That means setting up inspections. That means the 10 o'clock calls at night if something's on fire. You know, having the buyer agent have a presentation that breaks down through each stage exactly what it is and what the buyer agent is doing. So at first step, we look at a house. Second step, is that house a good fit? Third, do we want to make an offer on it? What's that offer look like? Once we're in negotiations, what do negotiations look like? So essentially giving them a timeline and what the whole process is going to look like and where, as a buyer agent, we fit into that whole timeline. And I think if you can show them a definition, that shows your value right there. If you just say, yeah, I'm going to show you some houses and we can make an offer on one if you want, that's not showing value. But they've got to see an entire breakdown of what the whole process from start to the day of closing is going to look like. And once they see that, I think that will start the wheels turning and help them realize, wow, this isn't just an overnight process. This is going to be weeks. This is going to, I have a full-time job. This is going to take weeks out of my work if I've got to do this. And I think that's a good place to start. And I know a lot of firms, I can't speak to every firm, but I know a lot of firms actually have presentation checklists and things like that. So helping your agents or an agent that's on here, go look for that at your firm to find out where you may have presentation checklists, and it keeps you on task when you're meeting with them. So when you do have a meeting, you're using your time in a good manner and getting to the point with them so they understand they can hit the ground running and know that representation is going to be to their benefit through the whole process.
Thank you, Meredith.
Yeah, I mean, I came from a professional services background. I think this whole notion about proving your worth as a buyer's agent is just like, well, what have you been doing for forever? The notion of it is to me is offensive and unprofessional, as if there has been no value before that we now need to like create this value. It's just name another professional, like you don't want, people hire a CPA for $1,000. They don't go in there and ask them like, how are you valuable? They know it's a professional service. In people's tax bills are far less than what they could stand to lose or get screwed out of or make or buy or whatever in a housing deal. Yet nobody asks. I mean, people get a speeding ticket now. They hire an attorney for $300. They don't ask him for his value. I guess I don't. The value's always been there. The value's not changing. You're doing a transaction that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you don't think that my professionalism is going to sway at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% in one way or the other, then don't hire me. I think it's an odd professional stance from an industry of almost 2 million people that they feel that they need to now justify what they've been doing for decades. I think it actually minimizes the value. There's hundreds of things that agents do, just like there's hundreds of things my CPA do, just like Zeno, there's hundreds of things that the closing attorney does. But nobody knocks on your door asking you to justify what you're doing. People understand the value of a professional in a professional transaction. And part of it is just like, if the other side's having representation, then who are you to not have your representation? That's not a savvy transactional model anyways. So yes, we have slides if especially newer agents need to have a slide to read from to prepare where their value comes from. But at the end of the day, we should be providing a professional service. That's the way that I look at it. And the whole scheme of things, and the amount of money that real estate transactions are, the professional service of a realtor can easily change that in any percentage that you want to throw out that's ever been charged.
Yeah, I would agree, guys. I think that's great. Venus, do we have any questions in the chat we want to shout out, or do we want to open up some questions for anything that I haven't asked that people have questions about for our panel?
I think you covered most of the questions. If anyone has a question we have not yet covered, please let us know. And Zeno, if you want to maybe go over any specific important aspects of the forms you feel would be helpful for these agents to know. I think just giving a brief overview of what you think about them and any practices you think they should start implementing from here.
Well, first of all, keep asking questions, guys. Ask your, like Meredith said, ask your leadership, ask your VICs. As we move through this, don't chicken little on us. The sky's not falling. We're going to figure this out together. We're all in the same boat. That's maybe the best silver lining of all of this. We're all in the same boat nationwide on this stuff. Like your panel has mentioned, I do think North Carolina has, for the most part, been doing a lot of this already. So if you're practicing and I don't know how it is in South Carolina, but maybe it's similar. But if you're on the call, it's probably not going to mean it's certainly not as big of a difference for you as it is for a lot of realtors and agents across the nation. And yeah, I've got two forms in front of me that, and guys, it's like Logan said, these are the most recent version of the forms. They may change next month. And then everything we talk about's changed a bit. But, again, a lot of this is about transparency. I do think, like Logan said, like Meredith alluded to, I personally don't understand how, if something is about transparency, removing it is more transparent. It makes no sense to me. And that's what's causing so much grief amongst everyone in the industry, is that why not just post it there? Then we all know. So, I don't understand that part of their thinking, but mostly it is about transparency, having these conversations and going over these forms with your clients up front. I think from what I can tell from the Form 715, it's basically like, look, we signed something 3 months ago. We're going to update those documents to adhere to compliance with the new forms now. And it's got a bunch of forms there listed that you might have signed with your agent, or excuse me, your client. And you're bringing those into compliance with the fact that you're talking about compensation now, that we're all agreeing who's compensating who now. That seems to be the long and short of 715 to me. And then, of course, 220, that's what we've been talking about. It's confirmation of compensation. Are we all on the same page? You have a buyer agency agreement that already says this, it should, but it seems to be to sort of be confirming who's paying what compensation for all the parties. So there is no ambiguity, and certainly no one feels like anything's being hidden from the client, from the consumer, which again isn't going to hurt anything. I do see it being cumbersome. I do see people waiting on the form to come through and not wanting to pull the trigger because the form hasn't come through or whatever. So again, I wish they would just post the darn thing, yes or no, for the masses on the websites. It would get rid of all of this, in my opinion. And you can still negotiate. I mean, anyway, you could still negotiate a price that's right for you, on both sides, given that information. But for now, they're gonna make us jump through this hoop as best I can tell.
Zeno, let me ask you a question about a practical matter. Let's say you have a first-time home buyer, they're buying I don't know, whatever, $250,000 house, right? Sellers are willing to pay 3% total, 2% to their agent, 1% to buyer's agents. You have a buyer's agency agreement with your buyer that says you're going to get 2%. So you're getting 1% from the seller. Now you need to get another 1% from the buyer. What's stopping that buyer in their offer from saying your buyer agrees to, okay, yes, I will pay you the additional 1% of commission. Then that buyer asks the seller for, what did I say, $250,000, so $2,500 in seller paid closing costs. On the closing, the seller pays the buyer $2,500 in closing costs. The buyer then pays the real estate firm $2,500 in buyer's commission. I mean, what isn't that? I mean, I'm not saying that's going to just always happen, but I'm just saying, like, why that progression could take place, right? Or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it could take place. And, they could either, first of all, you can always just say, well, okay, I'm going to offer less on your house than I would have if you had offered a little bit more, because I've got to pay my agent that money, or I could ask for it in a credit. You do have to be careful when a lender is involved, depending on what that number is, and make sure the lender will allow whatever that dollar amount is in a credit, a seller pay closing cost credit. That is a way you could attack it. Again, you could also just reduce the price by whatever you wanted. I think where it's going to become a little stressful is if they're trying to get that offer in, highest and best by 5 o'clock today, and they're like, well, I don't have this information yet. We'd love to submit an offer, but we don't know what compensation looks like. I think they may just miss out on that offer on both sides. Or frankly, you just got to talk to your buyer and say, I think we have to assume they're not going to offer anything. And maybe they will. And what offer do we want to put in that you're comfortable paying the compensation we've negotiated if they don't? And if they do, well, I'll be very happy. If they don't, well, at least we got the offer in with, in such a way that we're happy with if they don't. But you're right.
Similar to like a buyer now has to assume every house is sold as is. That's what it says in the contract, regardless of your inspections, due diligence, whatever. Now that maybe buyers just need to come to the mindset that, okay, we're responsible for this compensation. Perhaps it comes from the seller, perhaps it doesn't, but making the offer, they just need to have that presumption going into it. We'll see, I guess, how that plays out.
Yeah, and listing agents, their sellers can counter, and you can ask the sellers why they're countering, and hopefully by then you have the Form 220 in hand, and why, without having to discuss it directly, and they're offering, something. Well, we got to pay your agent, or we're offering your agent X percentage, so we'd love to see a higher offer. They can't say that, but they can say, here's the Form 220, and we've countered at X dollars more. Seems to me, again, this is why it's all a little bit silly to me, because it's all, it's going to somewhat be related no matter what you try to do. Removing who's paying what to the professionals. And I mean, if I know that I have to spend $10,000 on a deck repair, that affects my offer. That's a different vendor and a different professional, but it affects my offer. I don't know why they caused a little bit of a problem that now you can do that for everyone. I know how much my loan costs, my attorney costs. That can affect my offer, but I can't mention that the realtor's compensation can affect my offer. I think it's a little silly, but nobody cares what I think either. But
our listing agent's going to get in trouble for countering back, saying, "Oh, my seller is willing to offer this, accept this price with this due diligence, with this earnest money, with this closing day, with this personal property, and with this commission."
Right.
I mean, they're saying we can't, it's not an offer 220, but what about an email counter back? I mean, that's to me where this, I think a lot of, probably why there's so many people on this, and we're talking now about what we think is going to occur, but how is the state of North Carolina? I mean, that's how sellers are going to want to counter. I mean, I've already had conversations with my sellers that I have listings and offers right now. That's already how they want to counter. They want to counter with all the terms included, and one of those terms is compensation. And so is North Carolina, the Real Estate Commission, going to have an issue with us countering on all the seller's terms? I mean, those are all the seller's terms. They should have the right to counter on all of their terms. Are they going to come back and tell us that we can't include this in the counter? Like, I mean, that seems ridiculous.
It's ridiculous to me that a buyer can't say, listen, I'll offer 300 grand, but you're paying my agent's compensation.
Right.
Why not? You can do that for everything else. I'm offering 300 grand, but you're paying for my survey. You're paying for my attorney's fees. You're paying for my inspection. You can't pay for my realtor, though.
Which is weird to me, because the new publication that just came out from North Carolina Association of Realtors is they can, as long as it's not on a 2T, as long as it's not a North Carolina pre-printed form. But I highly encourage everybody on the call to go on to the ncrealtors.org website and go under the legal and ethics tab, and you'll see all the legal publications. And the one that came out yesterday is in there, and I had to read it 5 or 6 times. It's a page long. It's not a ton of information, but it does talk about that and what is and is not going to be allowed. And I'm not saying I agree with all of it, but again, throw it out there that NC Realtors is great. The legal hotline's great. North Carolina Association of Realtors is great. They even put in that bulletin about getting the advice of an attorney if you are going to put in an email anything about compensation. They say get the advice of an attorney first to make sure that you haven't violated anything. So they
But
know
the
this.
seller has the right to counter on all the terms. I think the real estate commissions are going to have a harder time with this, with enforcing this kind of stuff than they plan on right now. I think that's why they came out with these forms saying like, well, we'll just pigeonhole everyone in these forms and that'll work for us. And then that way, when something comes up, we can just ask them for the forms. Okay, that sounds great in theory, but I just, the seller and the buyer, like you said, they're allowed to counter on all the terms, and compensation is one of those terms. And so, yeah, I guess, this is just going to be over text and emails, sort of how it's been, and over, phone calls and this and that, other than actually on the 2T. We'll just have to wait for that until we've come to terms on everything else, which seems like a massive step backwards in my opinion. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be sellers that are going to want to take advantage of this and offer no compensation. Then there's going to be a buyer that makes an offer on that house and is going to tell their agent will tell them, if they don't pay the commission, we're not offering this or that or the different prices. So I just don't see how these real estate commissions think that they're going to avoid one of the massive terms in the contract when it's clearly the right of the buyer and the seller to negotiate those things.
Agreed. I agree. Look, if I was selling a house and I wanted, and they lowballed me, I might say, listen, I'll take your offer, but I'm not paying for X, Y, and Z. And one of those things might be your agent's, commission. And if my agent looks at me and says, I can't do that, I'm gonna be like, I want you to do that. And it's gonna, I mean, are we trying to do what the consumer says or not? And everything I've always seen from the commission is make sure you protect the consumer, make sure you do what they say. And frankly, if a seller tells you they don't want you to do something, and this happens with law too, by the way, I may not agree that with my client's choice, I might think they're putting themselves in contract breach, but I'm supposed to follow their instructions unless they're hurting someone or something. So the bar can't get mad at me that I helped them do something that they were contractually obligated not to do. I'm supposed to follow their instructions. So, which one do they want? Do they want you guys to follow their instructions and negotiate it back, or negotiate it on the front end, or not? And which one is it? And this is a move away from do what your consumer tells you to do what your customer or your client tells you to do. And I don't think they really wanted to move away from that. So I do think it clashes, and I do think they're going to have to come to terms on that.
Well, the real estate commission will tell you that they're in the business of protecting the consumers of North Carolina, not in the business of protecting us real estate professionals. Now, I think that's odd since I write them checks every year, but that's what they'll say is their mission. So yeah, so then in that same instance, how could they then get mad at me if I'm representing my consumer of North Carolina's best interest in negotiating this transaction with all terms on the table? So yeah, I think I think commission is going to become a point of each contract, a term of each contract, just like due diligence, just like earnest money, just like repair credits, just like personal property, just like all the other points, in a contract. The commission is going to become that same, thing, in everyone's going to have to be willing to do that. But yeah, where that discussion takes place, I think is the biggest unknown now, because they don't want us really doing it on their forms as part of the offer. I guess they just expect us to, do it in a quiet alley somewhere.
And again, why not put it on the contract offer? I just don't get it. It is not being paid by anyone but one of the clients. And so why not put it on the offer like everything else is? It talks about who's paying for their lawyer fees, who's paying for X, Y, and Z. And unless you negotiate it differently and add addendums to show who's paying for things, it's all
or
on
bonuses, like new construction always had, hey, this model, if you buy this model, there's $5,000 agent bonus. Like, how are we supposed to figure out that sort of stuff? Or back when the market wasn't, what we've had for the last like 7 years, there was a lot of houses that had X, whatever for the commission plus a bonus or plus an additional bonus if it was under contract by this date. We're now stripping that right from sellers to offer different forms of compensation to attract buyers. I just don't think that's going to pan out. I know that's what they're telling us right now. I just cannot see that being in an efficient market hypothesis that we have. I just don't see that being part of it. I think sellers have the right to offer compensation. Sellers have the right to offer bonuses. Sellers have the right to offer a free trip to the Bahamas or whatever they want to offer. You're not going to get around that by having a couple little forms for people. It's the seller's right to do it, to offer whatever they want. It's the buyer's agent's right to ask for whatever they want. It's the buyer's right to ask for whatever they want and as part of their offer. So I think these things are trying to pigeonhole things a little bit too much, but unfortunately they've peeled off too many layers of the onion to now put it back into just one nice little form.
And if it does, it'll move slowly. So we're gonna have to get on board with some of this for a little while anyway. Life will find a way. If we have any Jurassic Park fans in here, it's people are going to know what the commission. I personally, right or wrong, refuse to believe anyone's not going to know the compensations offered. There's going to be conversations happen and contracts are going to go under. They're going to come together on that. It is what it is. Life will find a way, and then they'll try to. I do think you're right. How do you enforce if my client says offer this, and I would be mad as a client if you didn't. I mean, that's the real thing. I think it's going to put a lot of stress on agents. I want that house. Tell them I'll pay. You might have a buyer say, I'll pay both agents commissions. I want that house. I'll pay, whatever. What a great offer that would be for the seller. And you can't communicate that. That's crazy to me. So, and I think it's going to be put a lot of pressure on you guys. Hopefully, ultimately, it'll put a little bit of pressure on the commission to be a little bit more realistic about this, because it's going to get communicated one way or the other. I think. I think that has to happen when you're trying to put a contract together.
This is changing so rapidly right now that really the commission doesn't know what they don't know yet. And until we start coming forward and calling them with these questions, I don't see it changing too quick. So, I encourage you guys, talk to your broker in charge or your team leader or whatever, and ask them if they're willing to have that conversation with the real estate commission to clarify some of those questions. In the end, our licenses are the ones that will be in trouble as agents. So if we have made a call to the commission and we go by what they're telling us to do today, tomorrow, whatever time period, then we're covering ourselves and we're covering our clients. This is still unraveling so rapidly right now and there's going to be a lot of questions. I did see a question in the chat real quick about if the seller doesn't want to offer anything up front, but will when an offer comes along. That's in that bulletin too, by the way, that a seller doesn't want to offer anything up front and what to do if they do afterwards. And it all comes down to that Form 220 again, which I know is still not quite what we're trying to get at this angle here. We're trying to figure out how it can be part of the offer, but that bulletin does describe that about them wanting to offer later on if they change their mind. So I think we're just going to have to keep reading these bulletins and having these conversations and asking these questions. And like Logan said, I don't see this being an overnight thing. This is going to be a year, 2 years. But we're all going to get through it, and you need to keep running your businesses the way you have and bringing value to the industry. And I think that's all we can do right now.
And get buyer agency agreements signed earlier in the process. I mean, that's what I've been, talking to our agents about. Is just, I'm just as guilty as I'm sure anybody else is on this call about not doing that as soon as we were all supposed to be doing it. So I think this is a wake up call for all of us to have those discussions up front with buyers and be getting the buyers agency agreements signed up front, just like you would if you were in another professional service, just if you would if you're going to meet with a financial advisor, going to meet with an attorney, going to meet with a CPA. The first thing they have you sign typically before you even come into the office is to understand how they get paid. If you go meet with an attorney, they'll tell you before you even come in for your free consultation exactly the how the firm gets compensated. I think, and I sort of think gladly that real estate's probably finally going to enter that same realm where the commission and the compensation is a discussion had earlier in the process, not on the day or two or three or four before closing.
It'll also, guys, doing that will weed out clients that don't want to pay you anything. And none of us have time for clients that don't want to pay. I get calls all the time from clients that don't want to pay. I have ways of ruling those out. And you can discuss that with them. You can discuss compensation if we go under contract. You can discuss, as best I know, just like I can, a retainer of sorts, an upfront payment. Listen, I'm going to show you houses, but you're going to pay me for doing that. So I know some agents are trying that. Some agents don't want to go there. But, again, transparency and having these discussions with your client and getting it signed and agreed to is I think the biggest lesson here. It's not what you can and can't charge. It's getting them on the same page and getting it done up front and early. And that's
well, and also as a listing agent, you need to think seriously about now how you're going to work with unrepresented buyers, right? So before, you need to have what your commission is if there's a represented buyer, if there's an unrepresented buyer, and how you're handling that, because I think inevitably we're all going to encounter more unrepresented buyers as listing agents, and we should be compensated for that. There's substantially more work involved. There's more communication. There's more hand-holding, and there's a lot more risk involved because the chances of you getting a complaint at the commission from an unrepresented buyer versus a represented buyer, I don't know the statistics, but it's got to be at least 20 to 1. So agents need to take that, listing agents also need to take that into consideration, that you're going to be encountering a lot more unrepresented buyers now. And how are you going to be justly compensated for that, whether the buyer has representation or the buyer doesn't? That's something that I don't feel like has been discussed at all in anything that I've been reading or listening to or learning about. But I think that's going to, over the next year, is going to become as big of a discussion as what buyer's agents are actually doing.
It's a great point. Anybody else have any other questions that we haven't asked yet?
There's a good attorney question in here. I think we actually covered this in the last call that we had, but the question is, what if sellers offer more commission than your buyer agreement states? Can we receive higher compensation? And then there's an additional follow-up to that is, can you make an amendment to buyer's agency to include the higher commission?
So you can always change, as far as I know, unless the commission wants to fight me on this logical answer too, you can always change what you're getting paid with your client. If they say, listen, I'm the buyer, you're my buyer's agent, I'm the buyer, and I agree, I'm going to make sure you get 2%. I'm going to cover 2%, and that's all. And if they cover it, great. Otherwise, I'm going to make sure you're paid 2%. If the seller ends up offering 3%, you don't get a 1% windfall because you told your buyer your compensation is only 2%. You don't get to make extra money for free, which, by the way, I'm not sure where I stand on. I don't know that I am against a seller anyway. We won't go there. But if you go to your buyer and say, actually, here's the value I'm doing, I'd like you to consider increasing this to my compensation to 3%. I don't know why you can't do that. I don't know why you can't simply say, hey, look, I think would you be open to increasing my compensation to 3%? I don't know how often that's going to happen, but I think you can do that with the buyer. You just re-sign the form or sign an amendment to them. But yes, my understanding is if you say, buyer, we're agreeing my compensation is going to be 2%, whether you're covering it or a seller's covering it. If the seller is offering 3% to buyer's agents, you don't get 3%, you get 2%. That's my understanding.
Yeah,
Is that what you guys are seeing, Logan and Meredith?
I would say too, sorry, with the amendment that you mentioned, I think someone emailing the commission and asking that question just to be extra clear of, can we amend it? Are we allowed to do this? I think just for clarification purposes, definitely email the commission and just verify that and have it in writing so you know what best practices to use for that.
Yeah, guys, I'll tell you this. I have ethics@ncbar.gov as a saved email in my inbox, in my Outlook, and I email them all the time. I don't care if they respond. I want them to see that I tried to make sure I could do something. And so if they think I shouldn't have done something, I'm going to say, I tried to get your advice on this. Now, by the way, they're actually pretty good, at least with the bar, they're pretty good about responding. Yes, you can, or you shouldn't, or whatever. I don't know how it is with the commission, but even sending that email, if it were to go south, I think is going to at least help show that you were trying to act right. And I certainly strongly recommend you guys shoot those emails out. My uncle calls. My uncle's a realtor, and he calls them. I'm an attorney. I want it in writing that I tried to do this. So I like the email option personally, but don't be afraid. You pay for this option, guys. Don't be afraid to shoot these emails off and ask these questions just to have it double covered. Venus makes fun of me. I have some of my bar responses over the year framed and on my bookshelves to make sure that if I ever have an issue with it, I'm going to take that to Raleigh with me and set it on the desk in front of me. So I kind of make a joke of it a little bit, but please don't be afraid to ask these people these questions because to Logan's point, they should be. I think the bar. I think it's the same way. I think the bar should be protecting me. They don't. They're there to protect the customer from attorneys. And to the and they sometimes forget what they say, by the way, at least with the bar. So that's why I keep these things like, you told me I could do this, or you told me it wouldn't be a problem, or you told me I could tell that client to leave me alone, which has happened before. So always ask those questions. Don't be afraid to. And yeah, I mean, absolutely run all this by the commission. It's free to shoot off an email.
Not just a personal how I've run my business for 20 years that I'll share. I've always told people if there's anything additional compensation, whether it's in the form of percentage of the commission or bonuses or whatever above what we've agreed to on our buyer's agent, that I agree to split it with my buyers 50-50. I've done that for 20 years. I've never had anyone complain. Therefore, I'm not extra incentivized to sell them that house versus another one, because that's the other thing that no one talks about on this is that for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, there's been campaigns from the government regarding agents and steering or neighborhoods and demographics and blah, 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 blah. Well, now we've just opened up another whole can of worms, which is steering around commission and compensation percentages. So I've always, as a matter of practice, and I do not plan on changing this after next week, is any compensation above what we've agreed to on my buyer's agents agreement will be split 50-50 between my buyers and myself. That way I don't have any extra compensation, because anyone that was around during 2008, 9, 10, when new construction builders were offering $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 agent bonuses on these houses, and agents were selling the houses, in the lawsuits they claimed on purpose. Lots of realtors lost their licenses and got sued over steering their clients towards neighborhoods that had massive, bonuses and incentives. So I've just always, as a matter of practice, I just split it 50-50. I don't plan on changing that after next week. And I don't see anything why I shouldn't be able to do that going forward.
Very good. Any other questions in the chat?
So there was a question. I'm not going to say percentages. So we're just going to, I'm just going to do X percent because I know we need to be careful with numbers. But Dan said, could we put X percent or greater if offered by seller? So can you put that in your buyer agency agreements?
I
We're
think
not
you're
supposed to put any ranges, and that is a range. It is supposed to be a percentage. Now, my understanding, and again, please reach out to the real estate commission, is that as long as the buyer is aware, you have amended the buyer agency agreement and everybody is okay with it. If the seller is offering more, you can accept more, but the buyer has to know about it. The buyer has to agree to it. And the buyer agency agreement has to be amended to reflect it. You can't just accept it, and not tell the buyer about it. If that makes sense. But again, with all the rules changing right now, please verify that. That was what I was aware of in the prior rules. I don't see that that's changed in any bulletins, but please double verify that.
My understanding is you can list 5 different compensations from your buyer, depending on the situation you end up in, as long as they're specifically listed. So if we find that log cabin, you're going to compensate me 3. If we find that apartment building, you're also wanting to buy, or whatever. That's probably a bad example, but you can be specific about if X, then you compensate me Y. It just has to be specific.
I'm just waiting for the days like, if after 9 months of showing you houses, I get this. If after 12 months, I get this.
Yeah. And honestly, my understanding is you can do that right now if you want to, as long as you spelled it out.
I've always thought that made sense, but I think we're probably headed towards it. And I always used to joke about it, but we're probably headed towards more of a world that's like that. Yeah.
I mean, guys, if I have to show you 10 houses, maybe you compensate me more. As long as a buyer agrees to it and it's specific, my understanding is it's legal and okay. Run it by the commission. I'm not your boss, but that's my understanding. As long as you're specific and open, you can still get somewhat creative with your compensation, even if it's paid up front and non-refundable. If it's a service fee up front, plus a commission or plus a compensation at closing. Anything else?
Right. We're going to go ahead and wrap up here. So wanted to give our panelists a huge shout out. Logan and Meredith, thank you so much for your wisdom and your time. This was extremely helpful. And we really hope that everyone here found this to be extremely beneficial. I'm going to drop the, let me see, the information for you to connect with our panelists, Logan and Meredith. So I'm going to go ahead and drop their info here in the chat. Feel free to reach out to them. Please give them a big thank you in the comments in the chat. Also want to give a big thank you to our sponsors, Zeno Lancaster Law Firm, Angi, Welch, Primelending, and Jim from Quality Home, and then of course Magnolia Title. So I'm going to get those in the chat here too.
Yeah, thanks. Doesn't matter whatever firm you're at. I'm always happy to have a chat with you guys about whatever's on your mind and bend your ear or my experience or whatever I can lend to the topic. So yeah, thanks for putting this on, and glad we had such a large and lively group today. This was fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you everyone for being here. I want to make sure there's no remaining questions. Okay, fantastic. And then we also have the Facebook group that everyone should join as well, just for follow-ups, the replay, anything like that. So let me just grab that and I will put that here in the chat for everyone to request to join if you're not already in here. This is going to be a great resource for you as well. So there's the link to that Facebook group.
Make sure you join, guys. We'll post the replay of this. You can invite your agents to watch it if that's helpful. It'll all be posted there. And there are 1,500 North Carolina agents in that group. So it's also just a great source of wisdom and collaboration there. You can have conversations about this stuff in there. You can post, ask questions, that sort of thing. So make sure you check it out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Zeno
awesome.
does a bunch of Q&As in there too, like from the attorney standpoint. So it's really helpful.
Yeah,
Awesome.
and thanks, Venus, for all your efforts on putting this together. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you to you and Meredith for being here. This was really helpful. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys.
We'll see
All
y'all
right, everybody,
soon.
have a great day.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.